For the first time since this whole thing kicked off, we are finally seeing some real, actual paths to de-escalation. After 2 weeks of just absolute chaos in the markets and in geopolitics, the first genuine off-ramps are starting to come into view.
So here we are, day 14, after 2 solid weeks of a conflict that has been shifting the global landscape by the hour. Today feels different. Something has fundamentally changed, and we're about to break down exactly what that is.
Okay, so to really get why today's developments are such a big deal, we've got to take a quick look back at the sheer turmoil of the last 2 weeks. The shock to the global system has been absolutely immense, especially when you look at the energy markets.
Now, this slide really tells the story, doesn't it? I mean, look at this. On February 28th, right before all this started, oil was just calmly trading at $62 a barrel. Then boom, it spikes to over $110 at its peak. But today, we're seeing a pretty big pullback. And that's the story we're diving into. Why is that war premium suddenly getting squeezed?
All right, so reason number one, and honestly, this is probably the most important one, is a formal off-ramp that has been put on the table by Iran itself. And we're not talking about some back-channel rumors here. This is a public offer. So what's on the table? Well, Iranian President Pezeshkian laid out 3 super clear conditions. First, recognition of what they're calling their legitimate rights. Second, they want reparations for damages from the strikes. And third, and this one is really the kicker, they want firm international guarantees that this kind of thing won't happen again. And this is where it gets really fascinating, because it tells you so much about the internal politics playing out in Iran. See, Pezeshkian is seen as a moderate in their pretty complex power structure. So the fact that he made this offer and he did it publicly while the supreme leader is silent and injured and all the other hardliners are quiet, that's a massive signal. It is the first real, concrete offer we've seen come out of Tehran.
Okay, so that's off-ramp number 1. Now for number 2, which is just as huge, a very public split is starting to emerge between the United States and Israel about what the goals of this war even are.
So on one hand, you've got President Trump. In a recent interview, he basically said there's practically nothing left to bomb and that he can stop this whole thing whenever he likes. The message from him is crystal clear. As far as the U.S. is concerned, the military job is done. It's time to start winding this down. But then you flip over to the Israeli side and whoa, it is a completely different story. Listen to this from their defense minister, Israel Katz. He says the operation will go on without any time limit until all objectives are met. That does not sound like a war that's about to end.
I mean, when you put these 2 positions right next to each other, it's black and white. It's like they're talking about 2 totally different wars. One is wrapping up, the other one doesn't even have a finish line. But here's the strange part. For the markets and for de-escalation, this split is actually a good thing. It gives President Trump the political cover he needs to just declare victory and pull the U.S. out, which, let's be honest, is the most critical piece of this entire operation.
So you've got these 2 big political escape hatches appearing. How are the markets reacting? Well, for the first time in 2 weeks, they're starting to carefully, cautiously, price in the idea that maybe this conflict won't just keep spiraling out of control. Yeah, let's go back to this chart for a second. See that gap? The space between that crazy peak price of over 110 and where we are today? That's what traders call the war premium, and it is shrinking right before our eyes. They're betting that the really bad worst-case scenarios, like the Strait of Hormuz being closed for a long time, are getting less and less likely.
And on top of all that, you've got the International Energy Agency now calling an emergency meeting. They're talking about a coordinated release of emergency oil stockpiles. If they do that, it's going to dump a ton of immediate supply into the market, and that could easily knock another $5, maybe $10 off the price of oil.
But okay, hold on, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Look at this number. That's the price of gold, trading at $5,195 an ounce. It's right back up near its recent highs. And what that tells you is that even with all this optimism, there is still a massive amount of uncertainty out there. As long as there's no official ceasefire, gold is going to be that go-to safe haven asset.
This has all been happening in what the financial world calls a risk-off period. It's pretty simple, really. For 2 weeks, investors got scared, so they dumped the risky stuff like tech stocks, and they just piled into what seemed safer, energy and defense companies. The entire market has been running on fear. So that brings us to the big question. Where do we go from here? And honestly, the next 72 hours are absolutely crucial. Everything is going to hinge on 3 key signals that we need to watch for over the weekend and into Monday.
First up, diplomacy. Keep an eye out for China or Oman. Are they going to step in and formally mediate President Pezeshkian's offer? Second, shipping. Okay, so the U.S. Navy took out the ships laying the mines, but the mines themselves are still out there. Any news, any headline about a cleared shipping lane in the Strait of Hormuz would be huge. And third, the wild card, technology. NVIDIA has its huge GTC conference starting on Monday. If this geopolitical situation keeps cooling down, you could see one of the fastest rotations of money out of defense stocks and back into AI that we have seen in years. Which brings us right to the final question. We have an Iranian offer on the table. We have a clear split between the US and Israel. The markets are daring to hope for the best. But are these the first real lasting exits from this war, or are we just in a temporary pause, the eye of the storm, before the next phase of the conflict begins? The next few days are going to tell the whole story.